Hiya guys, Nigel here with you, Nigel's Modelling Bench, and this is basically a video I'm slipping in between the Big Bad Buff Build for Beginners. The part 21, which is the last video I put out, has raised a lot of questions about seams. And what I did was worked on the very long fuselage, and it's raised a lot of questions about high and low spots and basically what I meant and when I did filling. And I've had questions before about when I actually assembled the fuselage and avoiding a step and everything. So what I'm going to do is cover this whole thing about joining two halves of anything together. So here we've got a load of bombs. I don't have anything bigger, I'm afraid, to demonstrate this with. So basically I'm going to do my best to demonstrate where we go with this, and I'll do a couple of them right, and I'll show you also some of the pitfalls by doing it wrong, and I will purposely make it go wrong. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the foibles with bombs, something you have to be very aware of when you start assembling bombs. And basically this is going to be all about seams. Now the rest of the parts here are smooth, they have no detail. There's a little bit of scribe detail on that one, but this has got raised detail and rivets and stuff on it, so we're not going to worry about that. We're going to ignore the detail, imagine it's not there. So we're just going to go ahead and assemble these parts. So the first thing we need to do, if we take these two parts here, these are on their own, we need to get rid of the sprue nibs that are there. So we're going to cut that one away. Okay, and make sure we don't actually cut into the plastic. Okay, and then this one hasn't got any because they've already been cut off. And then what we're going to do is sand the actual part to make sure it's flat. Now, I showed you in the wings and tail planes and everything about sanding parts to make sure they're flat, to make sure you get a nice thin edge, and also using pencil lines and everything to make sure that you are actually sanding right to the edge. Now here is something you need to be careful of. If you actually mark this up now with a pencil, okay, and then sand it, so let me take, I'll use a pen. You should never use a pen, because the pen will, if there's any pen remaining, it will get on underneath your paint and it will keep coming through. But this doesn't matter because it's an experiment. So imagine this is a pencil. So if I just put some lines across here like that, and then when I start sanding, you will see that it's not touching the middle, it's only sanding the edges. And that's what I mean. When I use a pen or a pencil, I'm using it to make sure I get the whole area flat. But in this instance, I don't want it to be flat, because you can see that when you actually look at the end of this bomb, you can see that these parts are actually like that. And if I actually sand them flat, okay, I will end up with nothing on the outer edge. I will end up with something like that, if you like. So be very, very careful before you start sanding stuff. Make sure that you're happy to do that. So with that one there, what we'll do is we'll clamp that together when the glue is drying, and we will use these little clamps here, which are really, really handy. So in fact, I'll find another small one, because the smaller ones are going to be better for this. So basically what we'll do when we glue it, we'll clamp it together like that, and then the glue will dry with it clamped together. So we're not going to be sanding that out flat. We can notice here that we've got a bit of a gap there, so we'll put a close peg on it. But basically we want to make sure that the surface area is flat. So just going to sand around here, and it's just going to remove any little sprue nibs. Now we've got these pins on here that help us guide the parts together. So you've got pins here and holes here. So we're going to make sure, use a bigger stick on this one. This is an Infinity, it's called a zebra stick. I get these from Premium Hobbies. They're absolutely brilliant for sanding flat surfaces because they're hard and they're flat and they don't really bend. So you can guarantee that when you actually sand, you're getting it flat. Now, if I go around here with a pen, okay, just go around the edge with a pen. When I start sanding, you can see that there's no pen left on the surface, so I know that I'm nice and flat, at least on that part. So basically we're going to put these together. Okay, so now we've got a nice flat joint. Okay, so what I'll do is I will come along with some extra thin or whatever, some liquid cement, and I'm going to glue the tail end first. So all we've got to do is put some down in there like that, let it capillary in, give it a squeeze, and then we'll put some more along here. Now you can see this is an advantage because it's actually springing apart. It's allowing us to get the glue in. So we want to get plenty of glue in there and make sure we get a really good glued joint. If you've got really good fitting parts and you just come along like this and brush over the top, the actual glue that gets into that joint is minimum. You need to make sure you're getting plenty of glue in there. And this is why I say about not using a pen. You can see all the ink coming out. Okay, and that's why you don't want to use a pen, because basically when you prime that, the pen will show through the primer, and all your subsequent coats of paint, it will shine through. Right, so that's that together. So let's get a couple of clamps on there just to hold this back end together. Now, I've talked in the past about a step. And what I'm talking about with a step is when you assemble two halves, like a fuselage or whatever, or anything like this that's got to be cylindrical, you need to make sure that the parts have gone together like that, not like that. Okay, so what you do is just rub your fingernail over both ways. And you should feel a step, equal amounts on both sides. That's just the glue oozing out, okay? So there's a step that way, and there's a step that way. Well, there's not much of a step that way, actually. So basically that needs a tweak. So what we're doing is we're feeling to see that we've got a step both ways, and that way we can make sure we've got the parts like this, not like this. Now in a minute I'm going to purposely do one wrong, and then you'll see the result of getting it wrong. So that is now glued together. Now I believe we've got plenty of glue in that joint. I'm just going to go over that seam once again just to make sure. But I'll show you a technique in a second for making sure we get plenty of glue in there. And if you haven't seen my big bad buff for beginners, go and have a look at that. There's a lot of basic modelling skills. If you're new to the hobby, go and have a look. There's a lot of basic skills in there. I go right back to the basics. So there we go. So that's that done. So that's all clamped up. Right, so move along to this one here. Let's do this bigger one here. Now, you see on here, we've got these location pins in the holes, and they actually help you put the parts together. Now, let's just imagine for a minute, because this often happens, those pins are out. So they're actually forcing you to end up with the part being misaligned. What you need to do is remove them. Okay, so you just basically cut the pins off, and now you can assemble the parts and you can orientate them as you wish. Okay, so if this is the bottom and this is the top, you obviously want to make the top better than the bottom because it's the bottom that's not going to be seen as much. Or if this is a drop tank going underneath an aircraft, you might want to make sure the bottom is good because the top will be up against the belly, so it doesn't matter so much. But here we can basically now get this how we want it and have that precisely how we want without worrying about pins pulling it out of position. And it happens, believe it or not, quite a lot, especially with older kits. The pins will be out of position, and on short run stuff you don't generally get any pins. So sometimes if you're doing something long and cylindrical, you might want to add tabs inside to help the parts locate. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to my Revell 144th scale Saturn V build, and in there I build the whole rocket up with all these tabs inside, and it makes it all interlock, and we end up with perfect cylinders. So go take a look at that one. So again, with this 220 Infini Zebra stick, I'm just going to run over this surface here. Okay, now you will see some people put a piece of wet and dry down on the bench, and they do this on a piece of wet and dry. Problem with that is if it's not stuck down, the sides can lift up and you end up producing basically like a bowl. So if you're going to do it on the bench, make sure it's on a hard stick or use it on a glued down pad or something. So you can do that and just rub around, and if you want to, you can come along with a pen or a pencil and just mark the surface. You could, if you wanted to, you could spray it with a bit of paint, just something to give it some colour so that you can see when you sand if you've got any low spots. Now we can see that it's not sanding here or here, so we need to make sure we're getting it flat. And the other thing, of course, is this face might not be dead flat that way. So exaggerated, these faces could be like that. So you want to basically make sure you sand them so you get them flat. Because if you imagine looking down here, length on at this joint, you want these plastic pieces to be flat together. You don't want them like that. So imagine this is the wall here of the bomb, okay, or the drop tank. So this piece here is this, okay, and then my hands are showing you where that joint is. What you don't want is this or this. You want them to be flat together to get the maximum glue joint area. So we can see now there's no pen left. Okay, there's no pen left on the face. So we can now do the same on this one. Go around with the pen, pencil, whatever. As I say, don't use a pen. Unless you know you're going to sand it all the way, don't use a pen. So just lightly sand over, and you can see that it's doing those little, where those pips were. It's sanding a bit here, but it isn't touching anywhere around there or there. So just a little bit at a time. And you can see it's doing the outside edge and not the inside edge. And there we go. And we've got a little bit remaining there, so we'll just go over a little bit more. Oops. And it's also a good idea, if you've got pieces like this that are difficult to hold, get a bit of blue tack, or a bit of white tack, stick it on like that. This has had it. It's not very sticky anymore. But basically, you can put that on there like that, okay, and then you can hold it like that and sand it. Okay, and it saves you having it flowing across the bench like I just did. And we can see now that's completely sanded. So when we put these together now, we should get a perfect joint. There you are. No gaps, no nothing. Absolutely perfect. All right. So what we're going to do now is glue it together. Now, as I said, you can come along like you see some people do, and they come along and they go like this and they brush over the edge and then they get some more glue. Okay, that shouldn't have happened. They get some more glue and they come along like this and they brush over here and they go, that's it, those parts are glued together. There we are, job done. Have a look at this. You can see on here, if I get close up, you can see that this plastic here is untouched. There's no glue gone down there at all. All that glue just sat on the outside edge. So basically, as soon as you start sanding, you would be through to nothing. So what I would suggest here is come along with a rule or a cocktail stick, just something that you can put in there and hold the parts apart. Okay, now move it up like so. Get them roughly lined up, and then you put the glue in, and the glue will go into the gap through capillary action, and then you can position them like that, pull the rule back. This is obviously a lot easier if you have still got the pins, and if it's a bigger part you can hold on to. If you want to see this thoroughly, go back and look at the B-52 beginner's build fuselage assembly. You'll see it there, and you can see there the glue. I don't know if I can show you underneath. If you watch along this seam, you should be able to see the glue track along there. There you go. Do you see it going along there? And now we know we've got plenty of glue in that joint. Watch again, you should see it track along. If I give it a little squeeze, can you see that moving along there? Can you see it here? You can see the glue there moving along, so you know that the glue is going into that seam properly. And this is what we're after. You don't want any dry joints. It's the worst thing you can get is dry joints. You can see the glue tracking along there. And then we can pull that out and then just come in the end, put plenty of glue in here. If you want to, what you can do is just stagger the parts like that, paint some glue into the seam, pull them back together, and now you know you've got a fully welded seam. And then once you've got everything all perfectly lined up, then you can come along with the rubber band. Get your rubber band around like so, a few times around there, get it nice and tight. Oops. Get it nice and tight like that, and then we can roll it out. So we spread the load, and then we can just finally give it a tweak, make sure it's all looking good. Okay, I've got it a bit out, so I need to push that side forward. As I say, if the parts were badly aligned initially, then you've got no hope. Now we can see here we've got a step. So I've got a step going that way, but I've got nothing going that way. So basically this side is higher, more towards you than this side is. Okay, so I need to push that side down and push that side up until I get a step both ways. Okay, same on the front. We've got a step both ways now. We know we're okay. Now again, that side needs to go forward a touch. We've got a step that way and a step that way. Underneath, same again. So we know we're all good there. So that should take a little bit of sanding, no filler, no nothing, and that'll be done. Okay, because we've sanded it flat, we've got plenty of glue in there, we've got the glue oozing out, and basically we're good to go. Now it looks like we've got a bit of misalignment on the back end, even though everything else is aligned. So it could be that these parts are actually out of shape. So see on the back there, no step that way now, but we've got a step that way. So I'm going to pull it up. There we go. We've got a step. We've got a step. Step that way. Step that way. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I think it's actually misshapen because the tail isn't lined up properly, but everything else is. So I mean, what we could do is concentrate here on getting the tail right, because that would be very difficult to get right. You know, if you've got the tail out of line like this, being that it's so small, when you come to sand it, you'll actually shorten your drop tank. So yeah, it is out of shape. You've got a step there, a step there, no step that way, but a step that way, and the tail end is aligned. So we have got some problems there, but that's nothing we can't deal with. So now what I'm going to do is do one wrong. Okay, so I'm going to knit these pins off. All right, now again, these are curved, so this isn't going to help. But basically, I've nipped those pins off, and now I'm just going to sand this part of the bomb, just to make sure it's nice and flat. I'm not going to sand the fins because they're obviously bowed the same as those other ones were on the larger bomb. So, right, what we can do here is use the advantage of those being bowed and hold it like this so there's a gap at the front, and then we can put glue in there, and you should be able to watch it capillary down. Put some on the other side as well. Just put it in there, and then when I squeeze it, you should be able to see it move along. We just brush some on there. Brush some on there. Did you notice I didn't sand this one? I've done that purposely because this one is going to be all about how not to do it. Okay, so what I've done here, now generally, as I say, I would hold these together, feel for a step, make sure the steps going the same to both ways. This one I'm going to do wrong. I'm going to push it out. Okay, so you can see I've got a massive step. I'm going to do it really exaggerated. I've got a massive step that way and nothing that way. Okay, I'm going to try and get it parallel all the way along. So we've got a step there, no step that way. I'm just going to remove that sprue nib. All right, so that is how not to do it. So basically, you've glued it together, you haven't bothered clamping it, you put some glue in the back end, which I didn't do before, did I? So just get some glue on those fins. Okay, I'm not going to bother clamping it together because I'm in a rush and I want to get this model finished. So I just bung that to one side and that's it. So that is how not to do it. Okay. Right. Now, one other thing to watch for is when you get bombs like this. These bombs come in two halves and they've got the fins on one side. So there's no fins on this part. The fins are on this part. But if you look, you will see that these fins are raised. So when you come to do your sanding, you need to be very careful. Now, once again, I'm going to remove these pins just so that it makes life easier for the sanding. So I'm going to sand here nice and flat, but not sand those fins. If you go down like this on your sander and start sanding, you'll basically sand half your fins away. You can see there that the fin is actually stepped out. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to remove these sprue nibs. Alright, now on this one, the other half, you can see that it comes along and it's stepped out to go around that fin. So this one, we can safely come along and sand it flat. No problem at all. Alright, and then we'll see how it goes together. You can see it's not too bad at all. Okay, so I'm just going to sand a little bit off of here because it looks like those fins might be holding it apart slightly. Okay, and then do the same again. I'm going to put my rule in here. Just to hold it apart. And then what we can do is put the glue in, let it capillary along. Going to turn it over. Put the glue in, let it capillary along. And you can see that it's all nice and wet now, that joint, which is how you want it. Okay, so got plenty of wetness in there now. We'll just put some more down in here. Turn it over, get some more down in there. You know, some will say if you put too much glue in, you cause yourself problems because you're basically making a wet solvent mess. Now, personally, this is all down to opinion. My opinion is I'd rather have a wet solvent mess and leave it an extra few days to dry than risk having a dry joint. You know you've got a dry joint when you start sanding any colour plastic. You will see a white line on the joint. That's when you know you've got a dry joint. And if you get a white line, stop sanding. Okay, my advice often to do, and I think it happened in the Big Bad Biff build, I think it happened on one of the wing tanks. What I did, as soon as I saw a white line, I just gently scratched it over with the end of it, a sharp knife tip, and then put some super glue in there. And I use super glue purely for speed because it goes in, sets, and then you can sand it. Right, so that's that together. Now we're going to feel the step again. We've got no step that way, not step that way, which means this side needs to come up. So we give that a little tweak. There we go. There we are. So that is how to build up a bomb where you've got the fins. You can see we've got the glue. It's just basically oozing out of there. So I can take the corner of a sharp rule and just remove that glue oozing there before it sets. Okay, and then it's just be a simple case of a bit of sanding and it'll be all gone when it's dry. So that's how to glue seams. So we're going to let that dry now for 24 hours, and then we're going to come back and have a look at how we can sort this out. And we can see this one here is going to be a bit of a mess because of the misalignment. We've got this one here which is purposely misaligned. You can see that's got a very large misalignment in it there. We've got this one here which is fine, and this one here which is fine. So We won't bother assembling those. In fact, what I'll do, I'll put these together and I'll show you what happens when you get a dry joint. Okay, so I'm going to write on here, dry. And the same on that side. Alright, and then okay, so I'm going to hold these parts together, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to use Tamiya Extra Thin because it's the most common glue and the brush is smaller. So watch this, I'm going to brush over here, just like it tells you to do on the bottle. Brush over the joint and then get some over the back there. Okay, and hold that together, and then I'll show you what happens when we go to sand it. There we go, job done. And I can put a clothes peg on there if I want, hold it closed while it dries. That's all nice and even. So there we go, guys. I'll see you in a couple of seconds. 24 hours for me. Bye for now. Okay, so here we are, what's this, 16 hours later. So these joints will all be dry now, and as I've told you, these blue rubber bands you buy at your supermarkets, they're absolute garbage. Don't bother, they just break. So that's been left overnight, and you should, as you can see, if that broke within 20 minutes, the part would have probably come apart. So these things, don't bother with them, just use your ordinary old brown rubber bands. So that's glued together now, and we've got a bit of a mismatch on there, I think, which is cool because that's going to show you how to deal with that. This one's all lovely, so that one's all fine. That one's going to be sanded down, another piece of rubber band. This one's got the mismatch where we actually proven that we actually put a step in there just to show you what happens. This is our dry joint one, which we're going to do first, and this is our big one that we clamped up and is all done properly. So you can see now that's all looking lovely. So we can get rid of our clamps out of the way and start looking at doing some sanding. Now we're going to do this one first, and I'm just going to remove this sprue nib. Okay, now a lot of people fuss about removing sprue nibs before they glue the parts together. There really is no point, because you run the risk of actually cutting into the part. You may as well just clip it off, sand the mating faces flat, and leave the actual sprue nib on there, because you can deal with that afterwards. So I'm going to start with a worn out 400 grit on this, because I want to try and show you as it develops. What will happen here is we should start to see a white line. So I'm using a hard stick. The reason I'm using a hard stick is because basically if I use a sponge, what will happen, I'm going to try and show you here with a pen and a piece of paper. Okay, so let me find a pen. What we've got is this. We've got the parts coming around, we've got the joint here, and then this part goes around here. And here we've got a raised area of glue and stuff, and burrs on the edge of the parts or whatever. Okay, so there's our parts, and we want to sand this joint and we want to get it nice and round. Now if I use a hard stick, okay, hard stick will remove that bump, so I'll end up with, exaggerated, I'll end up with this. Okay, a kind of little flat there. If I use a sponge, what will happen is it will come along like this. Okay, because what will happen is the sponge will be pushed away, because the sponge is, I'll show you here, because the sponge is soft and pliable, what will happen is it will push the sponge away here, and then the sponge will, because it's got to spring back, it will spring back down in here, so you'll end up with, exaggerated, you'll end up with that kind of shape. In reality, you'll probably end up with something more like that. Alright, so it's best to go with a hard stick first to remove your edges. Okay, and if you notice, I've got 45 degrees, and what I'm doing, I'm kind of rolling the stick over the bomb. I'm not actually pushing in like this. I'm just rolling the stick over the bomb, so we're keeping that round shape. We're not putting any flats on. Now in a minute I'll show you on another one what will happen if you go in with your flats. But here you can see already we're starting to see a bit of a line appear. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. that we can see a line starting to appear. I don't know if you can, I don't think you can see that on the camera. Let's try the other side. Remember, the sole purpose of this one was to show you what happens when you don't get enough glue into the joint. Now you can see here, we talked about high and low spots, and you can see on here, look at it close, you can see there's an area here of shininess. There's a line next to where I'm sanding. You can see it's shiny there, and that's where the step is. So what we need to do is either go over some Mr. Surfacer and fill it, or just keep sanding until it's gone. Okay, so getting rid of that sprue nib. All right, there we go. And then we can come in with a sponge. So I've got, this is a 800 grit sponge, and just go like that. Now, a lot of the questions have been asked, how do you know when to go from a stick to a sponge? Basically, once you've got your round shape, okay, and you've removed that ridge, so there's no step, you've got rid of that glue joint that's all losing out, you've got rid of any sprue nibs. Once you've got a flat uniform surface, okay, that's when you go in with a sponge, and you do the same. You don't need to worry about the 45 degrees, but you need to keep going around, and as you can see what's happening, the sponge is distorting to the shape of the bomb, so it's actually sanding a radius. Okay, now you can see on there, I don't think the camera's going to show this at all. Yeah, it's very faint. It's more definite on this side. You can see here, let me draw a pen line next to it. I'll draw a pen line either side. You can probably make out there is a white line in the plastic. You can see it there, there you go. You can see this white line, and that is where there is not enough glue. Okay, and what will happen with that, eventually it will crack, or it'll just fall apart. And if you keep sanding, it will become more and more prominent because you're sanding through the glue line. So if you've got a particularly rough fuselage with steps and it's all got undulations where it's not level, then basically what you will end up with is a very, very weak joint. Now I can probably squeeze that, there we go. I can squeeze that, you see that white line appearing there when I squeeze it? Okay, you see that white line there? That's actually where the part will just fall apart. So, I mean, I can probably split it open. No, I can't. But basically, that's what you want to avoid. Now, something as small as this, obviously it's difficult to pull apart, but if it was like that B-52 fuselage and you had that line over this sort of length, it would literally just break apart. So that's why I'm saying, make sure you get plenty of glue in your joints. You want to make sure you've got lots of glue, make sure it's all, you know, it's all pretty well welded together, okay? So there we are. That just shows you, you can see that definite white line there now. Okay, so that's what you want to avoid. Right, so that's the white line bit dealt with. So this one here is perfect. This one here has got some issues. So we've got some misalignment here. So it's pretty good and flush there. But here we've got some misalignment, and we've got some misalignment on the front and over the top here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in with a coarser stick. Now this is a 220 zebra stick. And the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these sprue nibs. Now forget about this raised detail. Unfortunately, with stuff like this, it's nigh on impossible to avoid damaging it. So we're going to ignore it's there. And just imagine that what we're dealing with here is a kit that's got recessed detail. So there we are. Okay. So I'm just coming in again with the 220 coarser stick. I should be going at 45, but I'm not. But basically, I'm just going over this and rounding it up. Now you can see straight away that as you're looking at it now, the left-hand side is being sanded, but the right isn't. Okay, now you can see that there, towards the back, both sides are being sanded. And what I'm doing, just so you end on, that's what I'm doing. I'm going around and keeping a radius going and removing that step. Okay, so there we are. Now I've got that round shape, so I can come down to a 400 grit stick. It's a bit of a finer stick, take the sanding marks out. Staying with the harder stick, staying with it, keeping it hard, not letting it lose its shape. Okay, so now we've got a nice, we've kept the radius on there, as you can see. There's no flat spots or anything. So now we come along with a sponge and just, again, doing the same thing. I'm going around the shape, go around, keep it around. And there we go. So we can see there, we've got a nicely sanded, smoothed out joint. Okay, there's no white lines, there's no weakness. So again, on the other side, do the same again. Now, if I was being careful and keeping this raised detail, I would basically come along here with my thumb, put the stick up against the edge of that detail, and then put my thumb there so that the stick can't physically go over and sand that ridge away. Okay, and that's your rough guide. You can see we've got a bit of a step in here. So what I'm going to do is blend that in. All right, what I would have to do there is put some filler in there. I'd have to fill that because it's too much of a step to sand out. I'll end up losing all the shape. Okay, you can see we've got a low spot in there. So this is what I was showing you with a pencil and a pen. Where is my pencil? As ever, Nigel, well prepared. Here we go. So I've got my pencil. Oops, too much lead in my pencil. So I can go over here now. This is what people were asking about what this shows you. So go over that with a pencil, and then when I sand away, I can see. Okay, so going over with a hard stick, and you can see you've got an area here where the pencil is still there. If you can see that, because the lead reflects the light. You can see there the pencil is still there here. So that shows me a low spot. Okay, because obviously the stick hasn't touched it. Because what I've done, if you can imagine this is the surface, I've gone over with a pencil, then I'm sanding, and if all the pencil disappears, that means it's all flat. But if I end up with just one little area where the pencil remains, I'll show you here. If I end up with one little area where the pencil remains, that means I've got a low spot. Okay, if it's all pencil and there's only one bit that remains, shows with no pencil, then that's a high spot. Now if I go over this once or twice, okay, you can see now down the middle here we've got no pencil showing. Okay, so there's your high spot, and the pencil is remaining in the low spot because I'm not sanding it away. So what I'm going to do is just keep going with my stick. And what I'm doing, I'm going around like this. I'm not just going straight across, I'm going around it. It's difficult to show you in 2 dimensions, but okay, I need a coarser stick because there's quite a ridge on there. So I'm just going to go to my coarser stick to remove that ridge. And come into that detail there and just go up to the edge of it like so. Don't be scared of using coarse sticks. A lot of people are really scared of going in with coarse sticks, and the beauty of these is they remove material and they don't add heat. If you start going at it like this with a little fine stick, you're going to start adding heat, and it's when you put heat in that you start to separate the joint and damage it. So I'm just going to go up to the edge of that detail there like that, and that is basically something that you get with experience. I can't teach you to do that. I can show you how I do it, but sanding up to an edge like that is just something you gain with experience. I'm going to come with the smoother stick now, smoother hard stick, and just remove the sanding marks, and then the sponge. Go over the edge of the sponge, and there you can see we've got a nice radius on there with no real flat spotting. If we have got any flat spotting, what we can do is just dress down the sides and just blend it in. Okay, the only reason we would have any flat spot in there is because we were too lazy to put any filler in there. Alright, so there we go. So we'll do the same here. Go up to that edge. Again, I'm not putting any pressure on the stick at all. I'm just letting the, I mean, if you look at how I'm holding the stick, I'm just letting the stick do the work. And this is, again, this is a 220 grit. Here we go. Blend that in with the 400. And then with the sponge. I mean, you can use a coarser sponge if you want to. This is a 400 grit sponge, I believe. Just get a bit of old denim. Most people say wipe it on your jeans. The trouble is you end up with all your jeans with no material left in the thigh because it rips holes and everything. So this is a coarser sponge. You can come with a coarser sponge just to finish things off, like so. Look, I've sanded away that area now. You can see I've still got a dimple there. And if I show you with the pencil, again, we can go over this area with the pencil. Okay, and then when I sand it with the sponge, you can still see a little bit of pencil showing there. Just need to drop a Mr. Surfacer in there just to blend that in, rather than sand the whole thing away. And then round the front, you just use a sponge to just get that shape in the front. And there we go. So that's that drop tank sanded out. I think we need to get some Mr. Surfacer in here because there is a bit of a flat spot on there, but not to worry. Okay, so that's how to sand out your seams. And I'll show you this. Now this is more appropriate because it's a more perfect shape. This part was a bit of a mess. But you know, if you're building old kits, this is what you'll have to deal with. Now here you can see we've got a lovely joint. Just got some glue oozing out of it. There's nothing much to worry about, so we're not going to worry about this 220 stick. We're going with the 400 initially, and we'll just go in, and again keep this motion going using this sanding around the edge. All right, now if you want to have a look, you can use your pencil. Don't use a pen, use a pencil. You can go over there and you can see that when you start sanding, once the pencil's all gone, then you know you've sanded your joint. So you can see we've got a bit of a line in there. So right now what I would do with that is put some Mr. Surfacer in there. Do the same on here, sand this one out, get rid of that sprue nib first of all, which is why we're using a hard stick. If we use a sponge, we'll end up sanding all around it and making a little lump. Okay, so there we go. We can see that we've got a bit of an edge on there. So again, we could use our pencil. Go around, sanding around the cylinder. And we can see there we've got a line, and you can see that's basically where we need to be getting some Mr. Surfacer in there. But we've got one side is nigh on perfect and this side's got a bit of a step in it, which is often the case. So I'm going to come in with my smoother stick, the 800, just to get rid of any sanding marks. Okay, and then I could come with a scribe across there just to clean up those seams, and then put some Mr. Surfacer in there, which we'll look at in a minute. Now this one here is the same. This one was the one we glued together and it was all distorted, if you remember, and I showed you how to use clamps and everything. So this one's got quite a gluey edge sticking out, so I'm going to come in with the coarser stick and just sand away. Okay, again, okay, we can see we've got a bit of a line there. That's going to need something to fill that. So we come on with a finer stick now, just remove the sanding marks from there. And then our 800 grit sponge. You can see there we've got the dimple where the sprue nib was, where it's ripped out of the plastic. So we'll have to fill that. And you can see we've got a line there, that's where we've got a low spot. And this is what I was saying about using pen. That pen will be there forever, you won't get rid of it. So it may come through the Mr. Surfacer, we'll see. So we'll get some Mr. Surfacer on there in a second. Now this one, I purposely made this with a step in it just to show you what not to do. So I'm going to come in with a coarse stick and I'm going to start to sand my joint. And you can see on here, I'm going to use pencil to show you. Again, this shows you the high and low spot. So put the pencil over the joint like this. And then if I start sanding, what you will see is the pencil remains on one side and not on the other. Okay, so you can see the pencil's there on that side, but on this side it's gone. So what the beginner might be tempted to do now is sand this until they start seeing both sides being sanded. Okay, so you go and you sander, you go mad, and you, oh, I gotta get rid of this joint, gotta get rid of this seam. We don't want to see the glue marks. We don't want to see the seam. We don't want to see the join. There we go, brilliant. That's lovely. We come on with our sponge and we can polish it and get rid of all the sanding marks. And oh yeah, that's much better. But if you look at it, don't know if you can see that, but it's not round anymore. You see it's got a big flat on it. Okay, so the correct way to do that, if you end up with this problem, is just to lightly sand, just to get rid of any sprue nibs or bumps or lumps or bits of glue, whatever, like so. Okay, and then where we've got that step, we can build that up, and then you can sand it round, and I'll show you that in a second. So we'll get some Mr. Surfacer in these joints, and then we'll let that dry and I'll show you how to work on that. Okay, so if you know my channel, you've seen this a million times before. Mr. Surfacer 1000, you can get 500, 1000, 1200 and 1500. My advice would be to go, if you're going to buy one pot, go for the 1000. If you want something slightly thicker, you pull it up on the side of the bottle like this and just let it sit there for a few minutes and let it thicken up. And if you want something thinner, just don't stir it. Okay, so there we go. So the dry joint one we're going to throw to one side because that's rubbish. Now this one here, if you remember we had this undulation here, so we're going to put some on there. Okay, that area there has got a bit of a sprue nib issue. And then here, I think we've got some shape issues down here, so I'm just going to put some all across that. Okay, and if you see that, you saw that black line under there, that's again what I was saying about the pen. And this is where we've got a low spot, so here we're going to put plenty of Mr. Surfacer. Now, it's good not to put this on too thick. You can sort of lay it on, but don't try to fill it all in one go because it'll just take forever to dry. So there we go, that's that done. If you notice, I changed mats because I don't want to get paint all over the all over my new mat. Now this here, you would probably come in with some filler, but just for this demonstration, I'm going to use some Mr. Surfacer, put that in there. Okay, and that's that. Okay, now, and if you notice, I've only put it on that side, not on this side. And I've also really exaggerated it. I mean, you would never get a step that big. If you've got a step that big, there's something seriously wrong with your model. But basically, you can see I'm just going to fill it one side and then we can sand that around. Now on here, if you notice, we had the problem with the sprue nib, so I could just put some in there where that sprue nib goes. And where it's deep, it will probably shrink back. And then here, we've got the gap in the part, the low spot, so we can paint that in there. And then on this one, basically we're going to go all the way along the seam because we just got little tiny areas all over it. That just require a little bit of attention. So we're just going to brush this on over the whole area, and what this will do, it'll find its way into all the little nooks and crannies and your panel lines, and it will basically fill the joints. Now, if you are very careful with your panel lines, what you can do is just paint up to them and don't put Mr. Surfacer in them. I find it's better to just go up to go over them and then pull the Mr. Surfacer out with the scriber afterwards. So there we go, and we can see there we've got a joint. Don't know if you can see that in the light. you can see it right where the end of the brush is now. You can see there's a line there. So when you see that, it's best to come along and just paint some more on, because that's where you've got a bit of a low spot. Okay, and this can be soul destroying, because you do this, you let it all dry, and then you find a line, you got to go back and do it all again, let it all dry again, and repeat. So this is why you will see in my builds, I often recommend look forward in your instructions. Like if you're building something like this, obviously this tank is in two halves, you've got a seam. Glue the tank together first. Glue it together, let it dry while you're building the rest of your model, and then when you come to it, you just clean the seam up, job done. Or, you know, after a couple of hours or a few hours, put some Mr. Surfacer on your seams, start to do a bit of a clean up, and then when you come to the point where you need the tank is done. Same with here, bombs, drop tanks, you know, anything that's large and cylindrical that you can build first of all. Like if you're doing a car, put your axle halves together, put your wheel halves together perhaps, engine halves, gearbox halves. You know, if it's a ship, the hull, you may have torpedoes and stuff. Anything that's cylindrical that you can glue together first without it affecting the rest of the build, do it first. Okay, look through your instructions and make a mental note or mark on your instructions which parts you need to be getting done first, and then they can be drying, and then when it comes to the point, like with this drop tank, this is going to be near the end of the build, it'll be ready to just glue on. Otherwise you'd have a model stood here completely, well, not completely finished, and you're spending 3 days doing this because you're filling it and waiting for filler to dry and wait. I mean, this has been, like I said, I glued this together yesterday, so this has been like 16, 18 hours. And now we're going to have to wait another 2 or 3 hours before we can sand it. So your model's going to be sat there. You can't finish it for 2 days while you're waiting for filler to dry. So get that done first, and then during the build you can be doing all this. So when you come to the point you need it, you can just have it there and bolt it underneath. So we'll go away now for a few hours, a couple of seconds for you, let this dry, and then we'll go from there. Right, here I am back. So Mr. Surfacer is dry now. So we can see that we've got these areas to sand. Now, I'm not going to be using a hard stick on this one because basically I've got the shape and everything I want, so I can just come with the sponge and just go around and just basically sand out, blend out the Mr. Surfacer, and what we'll see is the plastic starting to poke through like you can see here. So we're going to remove the Mr. Surfacer from this, and I'm not pushing down like this so that it's sanding. I'm just literally skating across the surface. And I'm using a sponge so that I don't end up with little flat ridges on, because what you can end up with is like a multi-flatted nut, if you like. If you're in the UK, you know, like a 50p coin, you'll end up with that sort of shape. So basically there you go. And you can see then we've got Mr. Surfacer in that area where it was low. Okay, so we just want to leave that now. Not touch that again, and then we can come around and sand the nose, and then we're going to go over this seam here where we had a low spot. Now I've got an 800 grit here. You could use a coarser one. Here's a 600 grit to make the work faster for you. If you've got a larger area, you know, you might want to go to a 600 or even a 400 grit sponge. But basically I'm just tickling it. I'm not putting, you can see how I'm holding the stick, I'm not putting any pressure on, just gently rubbing it. Now down here I made a mistake. I sanded that ridge away, so I'd have to rebuild that, but that was just me being hastily tearing forward. Okay, so you can see there we've got a low spot there. You can see the Mr. Surfacer's remained. You don't want to be sanding it away, you want to keep it there. If you sand it away, you end up with a flat. Not an apartment, a flat. Okay, so you can see I'm going around there with the part, and it's just, all this is just practice. I can show you how I do it, but I can't, you know, you can't learn it solely from watching this. You've got to have a go. So if you are new to this hobby, I suggest you go and get some, you know, some cheaper kits. Maybe even buy some that are partly started. You know, you often see kits on eBay that have had a couple of engines built or something. You have the, you know, you get it for next to nothing, and you can just build it from there. And there we go, just gently going over. And you can see we've got a bit of Mr. Surfacer left in there. There's a little bit here. We're just going to sand that away because that shouldn't be there. You can see there's a little bit there, a little bit there, and it's all just there to make things really nice. So we've got a lovely seam there now, and if we prime that up we would see that is lovely. It looks like we've got a bit of an edge there. So what I'm doing now is, you can see I'm turning the part as I'm sanding it and trying to just get some shape back in. It's a mismolded kind of flat area here. So, I mean, maybe it's supposed to be like that, but I don't think it is. But there we go. So that's that one. Now this bomb here, if you remember, this one was put together fine. And we had that recessed area there where there was a pip, and we had a seam here. So again, I've got the 600 grit sponge. I'm just going over, rolling it over the top, not pushing down, letting the stick do the work, or letting the sponge do the work, should I say. And you can see there we've got Mr. Surfacer remaining in those low spots there. Okay, you can see that there. And then the same back here. And there we go, that's our divot filled in there where the sprue nib was. I'm just going to remove Mr. Surfacer from there because I've got my fingers covered in it, and just sand that away from there. Okay. And then just with the stick I'm just going to remove that seam there because I didn't do it earlier. There we are. So that's the front of our bomb taken care of. Now again, you've got raised panel lines here that we could, you know, re-scribe or whatever. But there you go. So that's that done. This one here will come out lovely. Okay, so again, just stroking the sponge across it, not putting any pressure on, just letting the stick do the work. If you remember, we had a little bit of a mismatch on this one on one side. So round these fins, just be careful not to let the sanding stick rub too much on the fins, or you end up sanding the shape away. So here we've got a bit of a raised area where there was a sprue nib, so I'm just going to come in with a harder stick just to break that sprue nib down. There we go, and then I can finish that with a sponge. There we are. And then over the front. And if you're not new to the hobby, guys, this is all going to be a bit boring to watch, but people that are new will probably get a lot from this. And there we go. That's that seam completely disappeared. You can see we've got some Mr. Surfacer there where we had that step, but here it's all gone. And then we can come along with the scriber and round the edges where we've round the panel line, sorry, we could just come around with the scriber and just rub around and get the Mr. Surfacer out of there, come in from the other way, just like so. Just find the line and scratch it across, and there you go, you've got your panel lines back in as well. So that's that one done. Now this one here that had all the mismatch, I'm going to come in with a stick first and sand this side, and as you can see we still need to put more filler in there, so we mustn't be tempted to try and round up. We need to get more filler, so that what we're doing is sanding basically a cylinder rather than putting a flat on there, because as soon as you remove this side you'll end up with it being flat like that side is, where you've got that horrible oval in it. And the other best thing to do with bombs and cylindrical stuff is spin it in your fingers, and it should feel completely round. If it feels lumpy and bumpy like that does, obviously I can't portray a feeling, but if it feels lumpy and bumpy, you've got flats on there. That should be perfectly round. This one should be perfectly round. This one's a bit of a weird shape, so that's going to feel funny anyway. But basically, if I rub my finger over there where I've sanded, I can feel where it sort of comes up over radius, then it's flat, and then it goes down again. And that's what I'm feeling. So I could put some more Mr. Surfacer in there now and sand it to get the shape back. Okay, or, you know, add some filler or whatever. I can add some more Mr. Surfacer. I won't, because you will never get this bad. If you're this bad, you need to look at your modelling techniques, because it shouldn't ever be this bad. If you have got a fit that bad, remove the pins and improve the fit by gluing it together and then manipulating it as I showed you earlier. So there we go. Now what I'm going to do now is actually make on this bomb, I'm going to make a low spot. In fact, no, I'll do it on this one. No, I'll do it on this one. I'm going to make a low spot, okay? So I'm going to come in with a sander and sand away really hard so that we've got a low spot. And in fact, I'm going to get a coarser stick and I'm going to make a low spot on there. So we've got a flat now, so that goes down. So it's not only is it a flat spot, it also goes down, okay? Now I'm going to polish that up with a stick, with a sponge, so that we can imagine that what we can imagine is we've got a fault in the moulding, and that's how the kit was. So the parts came along, and instead of being round, in that little area there was like a sink in them, okay? So I'm going to show you now what I mean by this guide coat. So I'm going to give this a very light coating of paint. In fact, I'll paint all of them and I'll show you what I mean about this guide coat. Right, so now we'll talk about guide coat. So you can see I've sprayed a very light coat of grey on here. This is just Tamiya XF63 German grey, and this is the one I put the flat spot on. So this one here is, we think, okay. So I'm going to take, this is an 800 grit sponge, and I'm just going to very lightly go over, okay, and it will show up any low spots that we've got. Okay, now as we expected, we can see here that we've got this low spot here where the Mr. Surfacer was, and probably because I didn't leave it long enough to dry, we can see the Mr. Surfacer has shrunk back because we've got a dark grey spot. So what we would do then is go over with the primer, sand it back and check that it's okay. The other thing is, something I forgot to say initially in this video, when you are actually doing stuff like this, you must remember that basically the glue is a solvent. It is not a glue. If you take these two knife handles here and you glue them together with super glue and then you break them apart, the knife handles haven't changed. They haven't been affected in any way. The glue actually was a medium between the two pieces of metal holding them together. With the liquid cement, what you're actually doing is melting the plastic surface. So you're actually welding it together. So because of that, you're sort of turning a solid into a liquid, and then the solvents have to evaporate and leave the solid plastic welded together joint. So if you do all this too quickly after you've glued it, it will all shrink back. It's well known, people will build a beautiful model Lancaster 1/72 scale, nice big long fuselage, they glue it together, they put some filler in the seam, they sand it and then prime it and paint it and everything, get it lovely. They look at it a week later and you've got a seam line there where the actual plastic and the filler and everything is sunk back. So that's something worth remembering. You will get your seam will be sinking back if you work too quickly. I would suggest for normal thickness plastic, which is like a millimetre, when you're actually gluing it together, leave it as long as you can, but a minimum 48 hours before you start doing your sanding work. And if you're using sprue goo, I've done a video about sprue goo, this is it here, it's just basically styrene melted into Tamiya extra thin. If you're doing sprue goo, then even longer. So basically you can see I'm going over this now with this sponge very lightly, and we can see that the sanding marks, so you can see that we had some sanding marks in there, and that's the beauty of a guide coat. A guide coat is basically there to show you high and low spots. So where there is no paint, where you've sanded the guide coat away, it's high. Where there is actually paint, it's low. So we can see that little spot there. There shouldn't be anything around the nose of this one, and then we'll come around to this side and just lightly sand going across it, as we can see, and we've got little low spots there. Okay, and if they are like low spots like this that are very faint around the edges, you can generally sand them away. But if they are a sharp, like this one here is a fairly sharp dot, you're better off putting some more Mr. Surfacer in there. So basically we can go over the guide coat, the grey paint here, and we can see that we've got, you know, a line here, which is where we've got this funny surface. It's the actual moulding is at fault, so we would basically sand that out. Okay, so there we go. So on this one here, this one, yes, is it this one here or this one here? No, it's this one here. I've actually, if you remember, I sanded a low spot, so I can show you now how this works. So with the sanding stick, I'm just going to gently go over, and you can see straight away, okay, you can see that where I'm not pushing in, but you can see we've got a low spot there. Okay, so you can see we've got a low spot there where that sprue nib was, and we've got a low spot here where I've sanded it away, and that's what I'm talking about when I talk about high and low spots. Alright, so because the sander is flat, I mean, you could use a hard stick on this. Okay, exactly the same, you could use a hard stick, go over it, but because the sander is flat, it's not going down into the divot, and you can see we've got a low spot, so we'd have to fill that. Whereas on this side where I didn't put a low spot, okay, or where I didn't sand a low spot into it, you can see we can go across it like this. And once again, where we've had a bit of filler sinkage, we've got a mark there, mark there, mark there, and that's showing us our low spots. Okay, so if you use if you've got like black plastic, use white. If you've got a dark green plastic, use a light grey colour or whatever, and just, you know, use the guide coat to show you where your high and low spots are. And that's the whole idea of it. So as I sand that away, you can see I've got a low spot there, and I've got some little divots here. So I would just come along with a drop of Mr. Surfacer over them, use some filler in there, drop a Mr. Surfacer on that divot, and that will be that sorted. And on this one here, I think this one was nigh on perfect, wasn't it? So you just go across there, and you can see there's the lines of Mr. Surfacer under there showing through. There we go. Okay. So that has been your video, guys, on seam work, and basically this is just in an addition to parts 20 and 21 on the B52 build for beginners. But you can see we've got some sanding marks here. You can also see our scribe lines have remained. So, you know, basically that's what it's for. Okay, that's what you're, and this one here with the great big step in it, obviously what we're going to see here is, you can see there, you've got that huge low spot where we've got that massive step. Okay, so you would actually fill that and sand it round, or with this I would actually break the parts in half by reapplying liquid cement, let it soften the joint, break the parts in half and reassemble them. If you want me, get some glue down in there, get some glue down in there like so. Again, apply some more cement. These will come apart really easily. Take my knife. There we go. Be careful not to cut yourself. You can see there. There we go. We've got two parts pulled apart. So that's how easy it is. If the parts aren't glued together properly, whatever, I've broken that one there, but that's because I was rushing and butchering it. But if you take your time, That's how you can do it. And then when you want to glue them back together again, you just basically do the same thing again. You've now got a big gap there for the glue to go into, so we're just going to pile the cement in, get loads in there, and then clamp it together. Okay, and that's it. That's how to break parts apart. And that area there, you just put some glue on there, let it cure, bit of Mr. Surfacer, give it a rub down, absolutely fine. So if you've bought a kit that's been poorly put together, or you're not happy with your joints, you can always separate them and go again. Okay, so hopefully if you're new to the hobby, you've picked something up from this, and if you're one of those many people that ask me the questions about part 21, hopefully you've learned something. So basically the low spots, as on here, leave the paint behind. The high spots, the paint gets rubbed away. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all soon with part 23 of the Big Bad Buff build for beginners. Bye for now.